Thank you for joining me in this week's episode of Jason Stewart Photography. Over the past few months, we've been focusing in on photographic composition. And the reason for this is, in addition to lighting, composition is the single most important thing that will enable you as a photographer to take beautiful images. Composition is what separates good photography from great photography. And today, as we continue in on this study of photographic composition, we're going to be looking at a new rule of composition, and that rule is called the rule of balance. Balance in photography refers to the visual weight of the elements within your frame. When we talk about balance being the visual weight in your images, it's important to know that visual weight is the it factor that will enable you to go from taking good photographs to capturing great photographs. Now, when we talk about balance in photography, there are two types of balances that we must be aware of. There is symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance. And in last week's episode, we looked at symmetrical balance in how symmetrical balance places the subject in the center of the photograph and it distributes the elements evenly around it. In fact, let's look at a photograph that I captured of an elk in Yellowstone National Park so that I can show you what symmetrical balance should look like. And so this is the image of the elk that I captured at Yellowstone National Park, and you can see that this is an example of using symmetrical balance correctly. The rule of thirds would not have worked as nicely as capturing this image in the center of the frame. In most symmetrical photographs, you can cut the image in half and they would be a mirror image of one another. But it's important to remember that it doesn't have to be a mirror image in order for it to be a symmetrical composition. And because of the position of this elk's head and antlers being large and in the center of the image, there is a symmetrical balance to this image that invites us into the moment that I had with this elk at Yellowstone National Park. Again, it really just helps capture the moment that I was having with this beautiful elk at Yellowstone National Park by using symmetrical composition here and having a symmetrical balance to it. It really helps bring you into the experience I had as that elk was approaching me and I was photographing it. Now, if you would like to learn more about symmetrical balance or symmetrical composition, please refer to last week's episode on symmetrical composition. I want to spend the rest of our time looking at asymmetrical composition. But what is asymmetrical composition? Well, asymmetrical composition places the elements within your photograph in a different manner than symmetrical composition does. You see, asymmetrical composition refers to your elements that do not line up either in size, shape, or arrangement, and therefore your photograph lacks symmetry. Now, this is not a bad thing, as a previous episode we've looked at on the rule of thirds demonstrates. Rule of thirds is the most widely used and effective compositional method that most photographers use, and yet the rule of thirds by nature is asymmetrical. Now, when we talk about the rule of thirds being used, you can see that I have a grid over the camera now, and I am at the 1/3 mark on the right side of the picture. And when we use the rule of thirds, there are times that we're going to take photographs of a subject using the rule of thirds, and there might be a lot of open space without any elements on the other 2/3 side of the photograph. And when that takes place, oftentimes it can create this sense of lack of balance. It's asymmetrical, but it's also out of balance, and it needs to have some elements brought into the frame to help support the main subject. And so what I want to do now is I want to take a look at a few photographs that I've captured where I've used the rule of thirds, but I've photoshopped out supporting elements within the photo in order to throw the balance off. And so when you look at these photographs with the supporting elements removed, you're going to see that the visual weight is off. It's just very unnatural, and you can tell that something is missing. So let's go ahead and look at these photographs so that you can get a visual idea of what I'm trying to explain to you. And so in this first image here, you can see a photograph that I took when I was in the Czech Republic. This is in Old Prague, and it's a statue of Francis Borgia. And The reason the balance is off in this image is because there is too much visual weight to the right of this image. And the way we overcome this is by placing another object or element in the image on the left side of the frame. This additional object or added element will not be the main subject, but just something to balance the image out so that your main subject is more appealing. And it just gives some visual weight to the overall image and some balance to the image. And so let's take a look at this same image, but how I originally captured it. As you can see, because the church building is now included in the composition, all of a sudden we have a well-balanced image. Let's look at another photograph of a statue that I captured in Prague as well. We have the same situation with another famous individual from Prague, the great reformer Jan Hus. And as you can see again, when you have a lot of visual weight on one side of the image looks out of balance. And therefore, it can be a very nice touch to add a lighter weight on the other side of the image when available. Although in this instance, I actually added a bit of a heavier weight because I wanted the church to be a bit larger than Jan Hus was, because in the Christian faith, it's the only individual that should be elevated above the church is Jesus. And so in this picture, I just wanted it to symbolize that Jan Hus was a part of a bigger movement, which is the church movement. But as you can see, this image makes a much more powerful statement, showing the church standing high and tall behind this reformer in the background, as opposed to it just being Jan Hus with open white space. Let's look at another image. This is a photograph that I captured of an artist while in Seattle. You can see that there is nice balance to this asymmetrical photograph. I have an artist in Seattle who is creating a painting of the Seattle cityscape. And to the left of the artist, you see the city along with the Space Needle, and there's just nice symmetry. Even the grass and the bushes kind of play a link between the cityscape and the artist himself. So there's just a nice balance and a nice visual weight to this photograph. What about if you're out doing landscape? Well, here's an image that I captured in Mammoth Mountain. I did a short hike up to Emerald Lake, and so this is a photograph I captured at Emerald Lake. And you can see that the main subject is just the overall landscape with the beautiful peak sticking out of the trees in the background, and it's got the beautiful highlight on the grass below the trees. And so there's this beautiful composition there, but to add visual weight, I made sure to include the tree stump on the far right. It just gives a sense of balance to this photograph. Well, here's another image that I took when I was in Nashville. This is a cityscape of nightlife in Nashville, and you can see that the visual balance of this image works really well. I'm using the rule of thirds with the Batman building to the left of the image. It's just standing tall and looking so beautiful. And then in the bottom right of the image, you can see that there is a beautifully lit ferry boat that it helps add visual weight to the image and a sense of balance. Now, when we talk about the rule of balance or visual weight in our photographs, the illustration of two kids playing on a seesaw is often used by photographers in order to describe this balance, this asymmetrical balance that needs to take place. That if you've got this side of the photograph with a main subject, then you want to have, on the seesaw, you want to have some weight down here. Or if it switches into the middle, you want it in this area here. Or if you go up high with the weight and the subject's over here, then you want to balance it over here. So you see how that works with my hands? If it's just here, then all of this area here is off balance. Likewise, if I put my hand here, I've got all this open space here and it's off balance. So you want to think about a seesaw. Now, the most important part of composition is obviously the main subject, but this is why it's so important to study your surroundings so that you can kind of get that balance in your photographs and enable yourself to capture beautiful images. Because when you apply different compositional methods, you always want to be aware of the visual weight. And when we talk about visual weight, there's really 6 different areas that add visual weight to the photographs that we take. And that's what I want to finish up our time looking at, are 6 different areas in photography, or 6 different aspects of visual weight that you can use when you're capturing images. Now, when we talk about these 6 different elements that add visual weight or determine visual weight in our photographs, I'm not saying that all 6 of these elements need to be present within each photograph. What I am saying is that one of these elements will usually be the predominant element within a photograph that adds the most visual weight and enables you to capture beautiful images. And so let's go ahead and look at these 6 different elements, and then we'll close our time up. So the first visual element that can add weight to your image is brightness. Bright and colorful objects weigh more than less colorful objects. So in this image here of the countryside in Idaho, you can see that the beautiful bright red flowers are really the visual weight and the main subject of this image. But because of the bright blue skies and the beautifully formed white clouds, there's this nice balance within this image. But definitely the bright red is the visual weight that captures the most attention. So in addition to brightness, color is also an element that can add visual weight to your images. As you see in this image of a surfer, which I've actually titled this image The Surfer, but you have a surfer here walking along the path to the ocean, and because he's in blue and white and his surfboard's blue and white, it adds a nice visual weight and contrast to the rock wall that is behind him. The blue and white outfit and the blue and white surfboard that he is holding on to really adds a nice balance to the blue and white clouds above him. What about this image? I took this image of a little car parked in Frankfurt, Germany, and you can see that this dark red and gray car is an element that stands out in the image, but with it placed in front of this bright green building, there's just this nice balance of color to look at. You can see in this next image of a Muslim woman walking in the streets of Frankfurt, Germany, not only do the colors of the walls contrast the color that she's wearing, but there's also visual weight because of the direction she's walking in. Direction also can play a part in creating visual weight. Whichever direction a person is either looking or walking in creates this dynamic visual weight, and really this is why the rule of space works so well. And another element, a fourth element, is sharpness. Sharp, focused images have more visual weight than out of focus subjects. As you can see, these beautiful colors on the fall leaves from one of the trees in my backyard has a visual weight that causes it to stand out, and yet, because there are some images of leaves in the background that are out of focus, there's this balance to the image. And you can see in this next image, sharpness plays a big difference with visual weight than an out of focus subject. Even though in this picture we've got a colt and its mother in the background. The mother is a much larger horse than the colt, but because the colt is in focus and up front, it is definitely the main subject. It's where our eyes naturally travel to. However, because the mother is in the background and out of focus, there's this nice balance to the image. Another element that creates visual weight is size. Large objects weigh more than smaller objects. And as you can see here, this is an image I captured in Hawaii of a church. And in this image of the church, I photographed, in order to get that palm tree in focus, because I was right next to it, I used a wide angle lens. But because I used a wide angle lens, I still have the church and the other palm trees and the sky in focus. And the visual weight is distributed nicely because of the smaller palm trees behind the church. And so you've got this large palm tree up front that not only acts as a framing device, but there's this wonderful balance between this large palm tree and the smaller ones behind the church. Visual weight is what we're looking at. Here's another image that I've shown in previous episodes of a shepherd and his sheep. And you can see here that the sheep are the larger image, and the shepherd is back further and is a smaller image. However, the shepherd is important to this image not only to tell a fuller story, but for the visual weight and balance of this image. It just works really well with the shepherd in the position he's at and the sheep in the position that they are at. And so the sixth and final way that you can use different elements to create visual weight is through tonal balance. Tonal balance, the tone or the colors. As you can see, this is one of my favorite birding images that I captured of a red-tailed hawk being mobbed by a mockingbird. And both birds are tack sharp, along with the green pine needles of the tree. The wings of the mockingbird are spread out in almost angelic form, and the red-tailed hawk is looking directly at me. And all of this makes for a really good picture. However, in my opinion, what makes this picture great is that you've got the blue skies and the soft white clouds behind it. It's as if heaven has sent a mockingbird down to chase away a predator. Okay, I'm reading a lot into that, but you get the picture. The blue and white tones really help this image stand out. And so in this week's episode, I hope I've been able to show you the importance that composition plays in photography, and especially visual weight. The rule of balance is what we've been looking at. And when we apply the rule of balance or visual weight appropriately, it can take good images and make them great. And that's the goal of photography, is we want to continue to improve our photography so that we can consistently capture beautiful images that inspire others. And in today's episode, we've learned that there are two types of balance. There's symmetrical balance and there's asymmetrical balance. And there are really 6 elements to help make visual weight take place or be evenly distributed and enable your images to be balanced in a way that's pleasing to the eye. And those 6 elements are brightness. With brightness, the bright area of an image is going to have more visual weight than a dull area of your image. We've also learned that color can add visual weight. If you've got something that's colorful, whatever has the most color in your image is going to have the most visual weight. So color versus a lack of color or a lack of saturation in color will add visual weight as well. Direction is also an element that adds visual weight to your image. Whatever direction someone is looking or something is traveling in can add visual weight to your image. Another element is sharpness. Whatever is sharp in your image is going to have more visual weight than something that is out of focus. And size also plays a part in creating visual weight. The larger and closer your subject is, the more visual weight it is going to have over elements that are in the background that are smaller. And lastly, tonal balance. The tone quality of your image and how the tones mesh together can create a beautiful visual weight for your images. Well, I hope you've learned some things this week and will be able to go out and apply this compositional method known as the rule of balance. And before I say goodbye, I just want to ask if you have found this episode helpful, can you do me a huge favor and just hit the like button as well as the subscribe button? I'm really trying to grow this channel, and your support would mean a lot, and it also lets YouTube know that you like this content and want to see more of it. So again, thank you so much for joining me this week. Hope you have a really great week, and go out and capture the world.